The child was already slipping beneath the water, but the dog still refused to let go. Dawn had barely reached the North Carolina coast when Staff Sergeant Caleb Mercer saw the empty fishing boat drifting through the fog. It moved without direction, turning slowly in the gray current as if the sea had forgotten where to carry it. One running light still blinked near the bow. Weak, patient, almost like a heartbeat. Caleb stood at the wheel of his old 20-foot skiff, one hand resting on the throttle while cold mist settled across his jacket. The air smelled of salt, wet wood, and gasoline. Somewhere beyond the fog, a buoy bell rang with a hollow loneliness. Then he heard the splashing. At first, he thought it was loose debris striking the side of the drifting boat. Then a dark head rose above the water. 2 ears. Amber eyes. A German shepherd was swimming beside the starboard hull. The dog was large, broad through the shoulders, with a soaked sable coat flattened against his body. A faded orange K-9 collar circled his neck. Each breath came hard. Each stroke looked weaker than the one before it. Still, he stayed close to the boat. Caleb eased the throttle forward. The skiff crossed the last 30 yards slowly, its engine murmuring beneath the sound of the waves. The shepherd looked at him once, then turned back toward the empty boat. He did not bark. He did not swim closer. He only pushed his nose against the hull and kept moving. Caleb reached for the rescue line beneath his seat. "Easy boy," he called. His voice was calm, but something inside him had already tightened. "I've got you." He tossed the rope. It landed less than 2 feet from the dog's muzzle. The shepherd caught it, but instead of allowing Caleb to pull him toward the skiff, he turned and dragged the line toward the stern of the drifting boat. Caleb frowned. The dog was not asking to be saved. He was showing him something. The fog shifted. For one brief second, Caleb saw the inside of the fishing boat. An overturned cooler. A child's pink sneaker near the console. A juice box rolling back and forth across the deck. No captain. No passengers. No voices. The shepherd released the rope and disappeared behind the stern. Caleb moved closer until the 2 boats were nearly touching. Water tapped softly against the hulls. The sound was gentle, almost peaceful, but every instinct Caleb had learned in the Marines told him the silence was wrong. Then the shepherd surfaced again. Something red was caught between his teeth. A strap. He pulled upward with what little strength he had left, his paws churning against the current. Caleb leaned over the side. Beneath the boat, just below the surface, he saw a pale shape moving with the waves. Small, almost hidden. The fishing boat tilted as a swell passed beneath it, and a tiny hand appeared beside the rear ladder. 5 cold fingers clung weakly to the lowest rung. Caleb stopped breathing. The dog tightened his grip on the red life jacket strap. The little fingers began to open, one by one. "Hold on," Caleb whispered. He stepped onto the edge of his skiff. The last finger slipped free. The hand vanished beneath the water. Caleb jumped. 40 minutes earlier, Caleb Mercer had been standing alone at the end of the weathered dock behind his small coastal cabin, listening to rainwater drip from the roof into the dark inlet below. The storm had moved offshore before sunrise, leaving Bogue Sound covered in a low blanket of fog. Everything smelled washed clean except the old diesel stain beneath the boathouse and the sharp salt carried inland by the wind. Caleb tightened the rope around a loose piling and watched the gray water rise and fall. He had lived beside it for nearly 3 years, yet he rarely stepped onto his skiff unless someone needed help. He repaired engines for local fishermen. He replaced broken propellers. He checked fuel lines and weather radios. But when the boats left the dock, Caleb stayed behind. Water remembered too much. A current could look harmless while carrying the weight of an entire life away. Years earlier, during a flooded evacuation overseas, Caleb had been forced to choose between 2 wounded Marines and the German shepherd still attached to a rescue line behind them. The rope had tightened. The river had risen. Caleb had cut it. The men survived. Rook did not return. Everyone told Caleb he had made the only choice available, but grief did not care about logic. It returned whenever rain struck a metal roof or a chain tapped against wood. That morning, a loose hook beneath the dock moved with the wind, making the same small sound as a collar tag. Caleb froze. For a moment, he was no longer in North Carolina. Then the sound came again, farther out over the water. Not metal this time. A bark. One sharp note, swallowed by the fog. Caleb lifted his head. The inlet appeared empty. He waited. No second bark followed. Only the distant cry of a gull and the quiet knock of waves beneath the boards. He could have gone inside. He could have blamed the sound on exhaustion. Instead, he walked toward the boathouse and removed the canvas cover from his 20-foot skiff. His hands moved through the familiar checks without thought. Fuel, radio, rescue line, first aid kit, thermal blankets. The engine turned over after the second try, sending a low vibration through the dock. Caleb hesitated with one boot aboard and one still planted on the wood. The fog beyond the pilings looked almost solid, a wall built from every memory he had avoided. Then the bark came again. Weaker. Caleb stepped aboard. He guided the skiff into the channel at less than 5 miles per hour, keeping one hand near the throttle and the other on the wheel. Visibility was barely 40 yards. Broken reeds and small branches drifted past, carried from the marsh by the storm. After several minutes, he noticed something pale moving through the mist ahead. A boat. It turned slowly with the current, its bow light blinking though morning had already arrived. Caleb reduced speed. No one stood at the helm. No one answered when he called. Then he saw the dark shape beside the hull, rising and falling between the waves. 2 pointed ears broke the surface. A German shepherd lifted his head, looked directly at Caleb, and barked once. Caleb brought the skiff closer, careful not to trap the German shepherd between the two boats. The dog moved with the current, his soaked sable coat clinging to a frame built for strength, but now trembling from exhaustion. A faded orange collar circled his neck. The black lettering had nearly worn away, yet Caleb could still make out one word when the dog lifted his head. Atlas. Atlas, Caleb called softly. The shepherd looked at him, but he did not swim closer. Instead, he turned toward the drifting fishing boat and pressed his nose against its side. Caleb matched its slow movement, keeping the skiff about 6 feet away. Come on, boy. Let me get you out of there. He reached beneath the seat and pulled free a rescue line with a floating yellow loop. The rope landed within inches of Atlas. The dog caught it immediately. For one hopeful second, Caleb thought the hard part was over. Then Atlas turned away and pulled the line toward the stern of the empty boat. Caleb loosened his grip. That was not panic. It was purpose. He let the dog lead him. The fishing boat rolled gently in the wake, revealing its interior through the cracked windshield. A red cooler lay on its side near the captain's chair. A child's pink sneaker rested beneath the console, darkened by seawater. Beside it, a small juice box rolled across the deck and tapped against the wall with every shift of the boat. Caleb called out again. Is anyone aboard? Only the fog answered. He moved his skiff alongside and caught the other boat with a padded hook. Its engine was silent. The ignition key still hung in place. A gray jacket had been left across the seat, and a white baseball cap floated in several inches of water near the stern. Caleb saw no sign of the person who had been steering. Atlas released the rope and circled behind the boat. He gave a low sound, not quite a bark and not quite a whimper. Caleb leaned over the side, following the dog with his eyes. Atlas pushed his muzzle beneath the rear swim platform, came up for air, then went under again. What are you showing me? Caleb whispered. The shepherd surfaced and struck the hull once with his paw. Caleb felt the warning travel through his chest. He shifted the skiff closer until the boats nearly touched. Beneath the platform, something red moved under the cloudy water. At first, Caleb thought it was a loose fuel line. Then Atlas gripped it between his teeth and pulled upward. It was the shoulder strap of a child's life jacket. Caleb dropped to one knee. The water slapped softly against the hull, hiding everything below the surface. Atlas pulled again, his body sinking lower with the effort. A pale blue bracelet appeared beneath the water, then a small wrist. Caleb reached down, but the boat drifted sideways before his fingers could make contact. Atlas refused to release the strap. His amber eyes stayed fixed on Caleb, carrying a command no words were needed to explain. Look closer. Move faster. Someone was still there. Caleb secured the skiff to the drifting boat with one quick turn of the rescue line, then lowered himself beside the stern platform. The fog pressed close around him, turning the rest of the sound into a world of pale gray and cold water. Atlas kept his teeth locked around the red strap, but his breathing had changed. It came in shallow bursts now. His front paws moved beneath the surface with less rhythm, each stroke weaker than the last. Stay with me, Atlas, Caleb said. The shepherd's ears twitched at the sound of his name. He pulled once more, lifting the strap just high enough for Caleb to see the child's shoulder beneath the water. She wore a bright red life jacket over a lavender sweatshirt. One sleeve had caught around the metal ladder, while the lower strap was twisted beneath the silent propeller. Her face remained hidden beneath the swim platform. Caleb reached down until cold water covered his forearm. His fingers found the back of the life jacket, but the current pushed the boats apart. The line between them tightened with a low creak. Atlas released the strap for half a second to breathe. The child slipped lower. Caleb caught only the edge of the jacket before it slid from his hand. No. The word left him like a prayer he had forgotten how to say. Atlas went under again. A moment later, he surfaced with the strap between his teeth, refusing to let the water take her. Caleb pulled the safety knife from his belt and leaned farther over the side. He could see more now. A small cheek beneath the surface. Dark hair moving gently in the current. The pale blue bracelet around her wrist. Her hand still rested near the lowest rung of the ladder, but the fingers barely moved. Caleb tried to reach the twisted strap with the knife. It was too deep. He would have to enter the water. His body knew that before his mind accepted it. The old memory rose without warning. A flooded road. A rescue rope pulled tight behind him. Rook's amber eyes disappearing through the rain. Caleb's hand stopped above the water. For 3 years, he had told himself that he could live beside the sea without ever surrendering to it again. Atlas looked at him. There was no fear in the dog's exhausted gaze. Only trust. The shepherd shifted closer to the child, placing his own body between her and the hull. His paws slowed. His muzzle trembled around the strap. Caleb removed his jacket and kicked off his boots. "You found her," he whispered. "Now let me bring her home." A wave passed beneath the fishing boat. The stern rose, then fell. The child's hand appeared beside the ladder, 5 tiny fingers clinging to wet metal. Caleb reached for them. Before he could make contact, one finger loosened. Then another. Atlas pulled harder, but his head dipped beneath the surface. The little hand opened completely. Caleb drew one breath, stepped onto the edge of the skiff, and followed her into the cold. The cold struck Caleb before the water closed over his shoulders. It stole the air from his chest and tightened every muscle in his body, but he forced himself beneath the stern platform. The world became dim and green, filled with the muffled groan of wood and the distant churn of the current. The child floated just below him, held by the red life jacket and the strap twisted around the lower ladder bracket. Her dark hair moved across her face like river grass. Caleb reached for her, but the current pulled at his legs and turned him sideways. For one terrible second, the water around him was no longer bog sound. He saw another flood beneath another gray sky. He felt the old rescue line cutting across his palm. He heard Rook struggling behind him while 2 wounded Marines called from the rising water ahead. Caleb had made the choice. He had carried the men to safety. He had never stopped hearing the silence that followed. His hand froze above the tangled strap. Then something touched his sleeve. Atlas had followed him beneath the surface. The German shepherd gripped the fabric near Caleb's wrist, not hard enough to hurt, only enough to bring him back. Caleb opened his eyes fully. The child was here. Atlas was here. This was not the river from years ago. This moment had not been decided yet. He pulled the safety knife free and found the strap beneath the propeller housing. The material was stretched tight, wrapped twice around a metal support. Caleb cut once. Nothing. He changed the angle and cut again. The first loop loosened. The child rose several inches, but her sleeve remained caught on the ladder. Atlas surfaced for air, then returned, placing his body beside hers as if he could hold the entire sea away. Caleb freed the sleeve and guided one arm beneath the child's shoulders. Her skin felt colder than the water. He kicked toward the surface. The life jacket caught again. A thin line from the waist strap had looped around the propeller shaft. Caleb's lungs began to burn. He could let go and rise for air, but the current would pull the child deeper beneath the platform. He tightened his hold and reached down blindly. His fingers found the line. The knife slipped once against the wet material. Atlas pressed close, his amber eyes open beneath the water, watching. Caleb steadied his hand. Not again, he thought. The blade moved through the final strand. The tension vanished. The child lifted against his chest, and Caleb drove upward with everything he had left. They broke the surface together. He dragged in a breath and turned the child's face toward the air. Atlas surfaced beside them, coughing softly but still swimming. Caleb hooked one arm over the edge of the skiff and pushed the child upward. Her body remained still. "Come on, sweetheart," he said through shaking breath. "Stay with me." He pulled her onto the deck, climbed after her, and placed 2 fingers near her neck. He waited. The fog moved around them. Atlas struggled against the side of the boat. Caleb felt no clear breath, and the silence inside the skiff became heavier than the sea. Caleb lowered the child onto the driest part of the deck and tilted her face toward the pale morning sky. Water streamed from his sleeves and gathered beneath his knees. His hands were numb, but his training moved through him with a steadiness deeper than thought. He checked her breathing again. Nothing clear. No rise beneath the red life jacket. No sound except the soft knock of the 2 boats and Atlas scraping weakly against the hull. Caleb opened the jacket enough to position his hands, then began careful chest compressions. He counted aloud, each number firm against the fog. 1, 2, 3. The words gave shape to the silence. They kept fear from entering. After the first cycle, he paused and listened near her mouth. No breath came. He continued. The skiff rocked beneath him as the tide pulled both boats toward the outer channel. Rain began again, fine and cold, tapping against the console and darkening the child's hair. Caleb reached for the radio with one hand while keeping the other near her shoulder. "Coast Guard, this is Mercer on a 20-foot skiff in Bogue Sound. I have a young child recovered from the water. She is not breathing normally. I need immediate assistance." Static answered him. He repeated the message. This time, a broken voice surfaced beneath the interference, too faint to understand. The storm had damaged more than the shoreline. Caleb set the radio down and returned both hands to the child. "Stay here," he whispered. "You have someone waiting for you." Atlas struck the side of the boat again. Caleb looked over. The German shepherd's front paws rested on the edge, but his body hung low in the water. His eyes were open, fixed on the child. Caleb looped the rescue line beneath the dog's chest and pulled. Atlas tried to help, but his legs barely moved. Caleb gathered the remaining strength in his shoulders and brought him over the side. The shepherd landed gently beside the child, trembling from cold and exhaustion. He did not try to stand. He crawled closer until his nose touched her small hand. Caleb covered them both with a silver thermal blanket, leaving the child's chest clear. Then he continued. "Count. Press. Listen. Breathe." The world narrowed to that rhythm. The fog. The rain. The little body beneath his hands. Atlas gave a low, broken whine and rested his muzzle beside the pale blue bracelet around her wrist. Caleb remembered Rook lying beside wounded Marines during evacuation drills, refusing to move until every man had been accounted for. The memory nearly took his breath, but he held it back. This child was not a memory. Atlas was not a ghost. "Come on, sweetheart," Caleb said. "Just one breath." He completed another cycle and stopped to listen. For half a second, everything became still. His hands began to shake. Then the child's fingers moved beneath Atlas's muzzle. So slightly Caleb wondered whether the boat had shifted. He leaned closer. Her lips parted. A faint sound escaped, small enough to be mistaken for the wind. Caleb leaned closer until his ear was only inches from the child's mouth. The faint sound came again, followed by a small cough that seemed too fragile to belong to the living world. Then her body tightened beneath the thermal blanket, and a thin stream of water slipped from the corner of her lips. Caleb turned her gently onto her side and supported her shoulders as another cough passed through her. "That is it," he said, his voice low and steady. "Keep breathing." Her chest rose once. Then again. Each breath was shallow, but it was real. Atlas lifted his head. The German shepherd's amber eyes searched the child's face while rain gathered along the edges of his ears. Her fingers moved across the wet deck until they found the faded orange collar around his neck. She closed her hand around it with barely enough strength to hold on. Atlas released a long breath and rested his muzzle against her wrist. Caleb wrapped the blanket more tightly around them both, using his own soaked jacket to block the wind from the child's face. "You are safe now," he told her. "My name is Caleb. I am going to get you home." Her eyelids opened only halfway. Her eyes were blue, clouded with exhaustion and confusion. She tried to speak, but no clear word came. Caleb touched the radio again. "Coast Guard, this is Mercer. The child is breathing. I repeat, the child is breathing. We are near the Eastern Channel, approximately 2 miles from the public landing. Static filled the speaker. Then a voice broke through. "Mercer, this is Station Fort Macon. Your signal is weak, but we have your position. Maintain warmth. Rescue crew is responding." Caleb closed his eyes for 1 second. Help was coming. He looked toward the shoreline hidden behind the fog and reached for the throttle. That was when Atlas moved. The dog had been lying nearly still beside the child, but now his ears rose. His head turned toward the open sound. A low sound formed in his chest. Caleb followed his gaze. There was nothing visible beyond 20 yards. Only pale water, drifting mist, and the distant bell of a channel buoy. "Easy," Caleb said. "You have done enough." Atlas pushed himself upright. His legs shook beneath him. He stepped away from the child, crossed the wet deck, and stood at the bow. Then he barked once into the fog. The child stirred beneath the blanket. Caleb knelt beside her. "What is it, sweetheart?" She swallowed and tried again. Her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. "My dad." Caleb felt the words settle heavily between them. "Was your father on the boat?" The girl nodded. Her hand remained wrapped around Atlas's collar. "He fell," she whispered. Atlas barked again, louder this time. His entire body pointed toward the gray distance. Caleb looked at the rescue blanket, the waiting shoreline, and the dog who had already spent every ounce of strength keeping one life above the water. Then Atlas stepped onto the edge of the bow and stared back at him, not with fear, but with the same unshaken command Caleb had seen beneath the empty boat. Someone was still missing. Caleb looked from the child beneath the silver blanket to Atlas standing at the bow. Every responsible choice pointed toward shore. The girl needed warmth, medical care, and steady ground. The rescue crew was already searching for them. Yet the German shepherd was not staring blindly into the fog. His ears were fixed forward. His nose lifted toward a scent carried over the water. He knew where he needed to go. Caleb secured the child inside the small cabin, fastened a life jacket over the blanket, and placed a folded towel beneath her head. "What is your name?" he asked. "Lucy," she whispered. "All right, Lucy. I need you to stay awake for me. Can you do that?" Her fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. "Atlas knows," she said. Caleb glanced toward the bow. The dog took one unsteady step closer to the edge. "Your father taught him to search?" Lucy nodded faintly. "He always finds us." Before Caleb could reach him, Atlas jumped. The water closed around the shepherd, and his head surfaced several feet from the skiff. He began swimming toward the eastern channel, slower than before, but certain of his direction. Caleb moved to the wheel. "Station Fort Macon, this is Mercer. I have one child aboard and a possible second person in the water. I am following a trained German shepherd east toward the channel markers." The radio answered through static. "Mercer, keep the child secure. Rescue vessel is approaching from the south. Do not lose visual contact with the dog." Caleb eased the throttle forward, keeping the skiff several yards behind Atlas. The fog thickened until the shoreline and the empty fishing boat disappeared completely. Only the shepherd remained, a dark shape rising and falling in the gray water. Rain tapped against the windshield. Lucy called weakly from the cabin. "Is he there?" "He is right ahead of us," Caleb answered. "He is still going." Atlas swam past a floating tackle box, then turned sharply toward the distant sound of a buoy bell. Caleb followed. The channel grew rougher, and small waves rolled over the dog's back. Each time Atlas vanished behind one, Caleb felt the old fear reach for him. Each time the pointed ears appeared again, he breathed. After nearly half a mile, Atlas slowed beside a red navigation buoy leaning at an unusual angle. He circled it once, then released a single bark. Caleb reduced the engine to idle. At first, he saw only rope, seagrass, and a torn section of fishing net wrapped around the buoy's lower chain. Then something moved beneath the surface. A white baseball cap drifted free and turned slowly in the current. Atlas lowered his muzzle to the water and began pawing beside the net. Caleb took the rescue hook and leaned over the side. Several feet below, a hand appeared through the green water. It was larger than Lucy's. An adult hand, open and motionless, caught beneath the tangled line. Caleb reached for the radio, but Atlas had already taken hold of a loose strap and begun pulling upward. Somewhere under the tilted buoy, Lucy's father was still there. Caleb secured the skiff beside the leaning buoy and shut the engine down. The sudden quiet felt unnatural. Rain touched the water in 1,000 soft circles, while the buoy bell sounded above them with a slow, hollow rhythm. Atlas kept pulling at the loose strap, his body trembling with effort. Each time the current shifted, the strap disappeared beneath the surface, then rose again between his teeth. Caleb moved to the stern and clipped a safety line around his waist. "Lucy," he called toward the cabin, "I need you to keep talking to me." Her voice came faintly through the open door. "I am here." "Good. Keep the blanket around you. Help is coming." He reached down with the rescue hook and caught the edge of the torn fishing net. It resisted at first, heavy with sea grass and wrapped tightly around the buoy chain. Caleb pulled until a section rose above the water. Beneath it, he saw a gray life jacket and the shoulder of a man held several feet below the surface. The jacket had become trapped where the net twisted around the anchor line. A narrow pocket of air remained beneath the tilted base of the buoy, just large enough to keep part of the man's face above water whenever the waves lifted him. It was not much, but it meant there was still a chance. "Daniel," Caleb called, using the name Lucy had whispered. "Can you hear me?" The man did not answer. Atlas released the strap and barked toward the submerged figure. The sound echoed across the fog. Caleb keyed the radio. "Station Fort Macon, this is Mercer. I have located an adult male beneath the Eastern Channel buoy. He is entangled, but may still be breathing. Send rescue support to my signal." The reply came more clearly now. "Mercer, rescue vessel is approximately 8 minutes away. Maintain your position. Do not place yourself at unnecessary risk." 8 minutes. Caleb looked at the water rising and falling around Daniel's face. The small air pocket was shrinking each time the buoy rolled. Atlas looked up at him, water streaming from his muzzle. There was no impatience in the dog's eyes, only trust. Caleb lowered the rescue hook again and tried to lift the net away from Daniel's shoulder. The mesh tightened instead. He changed direction, pulling it toward the chain, but the current caught the loose section and wrapped it farther around the metal. Daniel's hand moved beneath the water. It was slight, no more than a weak turn of the fingers, but Caleb saw it. "He is alive," he said. Lucy heard him from the cabin. "Daddy, he is still with us," Caleb answered. Atlas placed both front paws against the side of the skiff, waiting. Caleb fastened a second line to the boat and threaded it through the handle of the rescue knife. He could not reach the trapped section from above. He would have to go under. The water from his first dive still filled his clothes with cold, and his muscles had begun to stiffen. He remembered the warning over the radio. He remembered the men he had saved years ago. He remembered the one partner he had not brought home. Atlas gave a low whine. Caleb met the shepherd's eyes. "Stay with the boat," he said. "Watch Lucy." Atlas did not move. Caleb pulled the safety line tight, took one slow breath, and lowered himself into the water beside the buoy. Below him, the net shifted in the green darkness, and Daniel's hand opened once more.